I knew something was off for weeks before I finally caught her. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, just a nagging feeling that wouldn't go away. At night, I'd lie in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, wondering why she wasn't the same. It wasn't the usual stuff, the petty disagreements, the tiredness we all feel after years together. No, this was different. Her laugh was too loud when she talked to him. It wasn't the same when she touched me, like she was doing it out of habit rather than love. But it wasn't until that Thursday afternoon that everything finally clicked into place. I had just gotten home from work earlier than usual. The kids were at soccer practice, and I was looking forward to the house being quiet for a change. When I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was the smell of something foreign, something floral and sweet, like a perfume I didn't recognize. I called out, but there was no answer. The house was eerily still. I checked the kitchen, then the living room. And that's when I saw it. Her phone was lying on the couch, face up. I had no real reason to look, no real justification for what I was about to do. But something in me clicked, and I picked it up. At first, I scrolled through the usual stuff, texts with friends, reminders for appointments, pictures of the kids. But then, in a thread buried deep in the middle of it all, I saw a message that made my heart drop. It was a text from someone named Mr. Ryan, and it was sent around noon that day. The message was simple. Can't wait for tonight. I'll pick you up after school. 6 p.m., don't be late. I had no idea who Mr. Ryan was. The name didn't mean anything to me, but something about it made my stomach churn. I scrolled further back through the thread, each message more intimate than the last. They weren't just casual. They weren't just professional. The words they used were affectionate, the kind of language you reserve for someone you're not supposed to be speaking to. I sat there, frozen, my fingers gripping the phone tightly. Who the hell was this guy? My mind raced, trying to place the name. But no matter how hard I thought, I couldn't figure it out. Mr. Ryan. It didn't sound familiar at all. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just some random person. This was someone she knew, someone I hadn't been told about. And that's when I realized just how much I didn't know about her. I didn't want to confront her yet. Not right then. Something in me told me to wait, to gather more information. But my hands were shaking. I put the phone back down on the couch, my mind a mess of confusion and anger. What the hell was going on? I spent the next hour pacing around the house, pretending to be normal when she walked in. She came in smiling, and for a moment, I almost forgot what I had just discovered. Her smile was the same as it had always been, but something in her eyes was different, as if she was already anticipating the conversation that was about to come. I tried to act normal as she walked in, but I could barely focus. Her smile, the same as always, felt out of place now. "Hey, honey," she said, taking off her shoes. "How was your day?" "Good," I said, my voice sounding tight, almost forced. I wanted to ask her what the hell was going on, but I stopped myself. I wasn't ready yet. Not until I knew more. She walked into the kitchen, humming, as if nothing was wrong. It was hard to keep my thoughts straight while she moved around the house like everything was fine. My mind kept circling back to that message. Can't wait for tonight. I'll pick you up after school. 6 p.m., don't be late. I had to know more. It was too strange. But what if I was overthinking it? Maybe Mr. Ryan was someone she worked with. Maybe they were just discussing a school project. But something didn't sit right with that explanation. Those texts weren't about work. They were too personal. She opened the fridge and took out a bottle of water, taking a sip without a care in the world. Meanwhile, my insides were twisting in knots. I wasn't stupid. I knew what I'd seen. It wasn't just an innocent message. This was something else. She turned to me, concern in her eyes. "What's wrong, babe?" I wanted to shout, to demand answers. But I knew better. I needed to stay calm. I couldn't rush this. "Just tired," I muttered, forcing a smile. She nodded, turning back to unpack the groceries. I stayed quiet, my thoughts spinning. What if this wasn't the first time? What if this had been happening for months, and I was the last to know? I couldn't let it go. I had to find out more. But how? How could I get to the truth without exposing myself? I wasn't sure, but I knew I couldn't back down. I had to know who Mr. Ryan was. That night, I stayed awake long after she had gone to bed. My mind raced. I could hear her soft breathing in the other room, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the text, about Mr. Ryan. Who was he? Why didn't I know about him? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I truly knew about her life outside of what she shared with me. I had to find out who he was. I couldn't let this go on any longer. The next day, I kept my distance. I didn't want to seem suspicious, but every time she picked up her phone, I felt my heart race. It was like I was waiting for something to confirm my worst fears. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Around noon, I decided to take action. The kids were at school, and I had a few hours of peace. I waited for her to leave the room, then I picked up her phone again. I told myself I wasn't going to snoop, but the temptation was too strong. I needed answers. I scrolled through her messages, looking for anything that could lead me to him. It didn't take long. As I skimmed through, I found another message from Mr. Ryan. This one was even more intimate than the last. I miss you already. Can't stop thinking about last night. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe. Last night. What the hell did that mean? I felt sick, but I kept going, scrolling through their conversation like a man on a mission. Each text was worse than the last. She was flirting with him, talking to him like he was someone she was in love with, someone who wasn't me. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I had to hold it together. I was this close to finding out who he was, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. Just then, I heard her coming back down the stairs. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly put the phone back on the couch, pretending I had been doing something else. She walked in, giving me a curious look. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice light, as if nothing was wrong. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just needed a minute." She didn't press, but I could see the tiniest glimmer of suspicion in her eyes. Maybe she knew I was onto something. But what could I do? I had to play it cool. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. The messages were haunting me, each word eating away at my mind. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, my wife beside me, unaware of what was building inside me. I had never felt this kind of distance between us. It wasn't just the words she'd shared with Mr. Ryan. It was everything. The way she smiled a little too brightly when she spoke about him. The little things I hadn't noticed until now. I had to find out more. I couldn't keep living in this fog of suspicion. The next day, I decided to do something I never thought I would. I went to the school. I didn't have a good reason to be there, not really. But I needed answers, and I needed them now. If Mr. Ryan was a teacher, I could at least find out who he was. I didn't want to confront her just yet. I couldn't risk tipping her off. But I had to start somewhere. I parked in front of the school, taking a deep breath before getting out of the car. I could feel my pulse racing, my thoughts scattered. I had no idea what I was doing or what I hoped to find, but I couldn't back down. Not now. I walked into the school office, trying to act casual, but the secretary gave me a strange look when I asked about Mr. Ryan. She was polite enough, but there was something in her eyes that made me feel like she knew exactly what I was asking about. She told me he was a teacher in the 5th grade. She seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then she added, "He's a good teacher. Very dedicated." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of anger and fear bubbling inside me. The more I learned, the more I hated this. He was real. He wasn't just a name in a text message. I walked out of the office, my mind reeling. I didn't know what to do next. Should I go to the principal? Should I confront him? What would that even accomplish? I didn't know. All I knew was that I had to keep going, no matter how much it hurt. As I sat in the car, trying to make sense of everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There was more to this story, more that I needed to uncover. And I would. I was determined to find out everything, no matter the cost. The next few days passed in a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening right under my nose, something I wasn't supposed to see. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. After all, I didn't have concrete proof of anything. It could just be a misunderstanding. Maybe Mr. Ryan was just a teacher she was friendly with. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. I started watching her more closely. Her behavior had changed subtly over the past few months. Small things, like the way she always seemed to be texting when I wasn't looking or how she would go out of her way to avoid certain topics when we spoke. It was like she had a secret life I wasn't a part of. One afternoon, I was working from home when I saw her pull into the driveway. I glanced at the clock. The kids wouldn't be home for another hour. I hadn't planned on confronting her today, but something in me couldn't wait any longer. I needed to know the truth, no matter what it took. I heard the door open, then the sound of her footsteps. She came into the living room, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Hey, babe," she said, giving me a kiss on the cheek. It felt so normal. Too normal. "Hey," I replied, not trusting my voice. I tried to act casual, but my heart was pounding. I had to ask her, but I didn't know how. She smiled at me and started to walk toward the kitchen, but I stopped her. I need to ask you something. Her face faltered for just a split second, a quick flash of hesitation. She tried to hide it, but I saw it. What's up? I swallowed hard. Who's Mr. Ryan? She froze. Her eyes widened, just for a moment, but it was enough to tell me everything I needed to know. She wasn't expecting this question. Why do you ask? She said too quickly. I could hear the tension in her voice, the nervousness. Just curious, I said, keeping my tone even. I found a couple of messages between you two. It's nothing really, but it didn't seem, just professional. Her face turned pale. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. It's nothing, I swear, she said too quickly, her voice shaky. He's just a teacher. A friend. That's all. I wanted to believe her, but every instinct inside me screamed that she was lying. I nodded slowly, trying to mask the anger that was rising inside me. Okay. She let out a sigh of relief and walked away, but I wasn't done. I knew she wasn't telling me the whole truth, and I couldn't let her get away with it. The conversation didn't settle right in my gut. Her response was too quick, too rehearsed. She was hiding something, but I wasn't going to push her further, not yet. I needed more. I wasn't going to let her get away with the vague answer she gave me. I had to keep digging, even if it meant hurting myself more in the process. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat down at the kitchen table, replaying the conversation in my mind. Her nervousness was still fresh in my mind. She'd never acted that way before, not even when I confronted her about the smallest things. This time was different. I tried to talk myself out of it. Maybe it was just a phase. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But deep down, I knew I wasn't wrong. I wasn't imagining the things I'd seen. The way she looked at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, how she would laugh a little too loudly when he texted her. I went back to her phone. I knew it wasn't right to keep snooping, but I couldn't help myself. The curiosity gnawed at me like a sickness I couldn't shake. I needed to know who Mr. Ryan was. I wasn't just going to take her word for it anymore. The screen unlocked easily enough. She hadn't changed the passcode. I scrolled through the messages again, feeling the weight of each one. There was no denying it now. This wasn't just an innocent friendship. She was talking to him like he was more than that. One text from her stood out. It was from a few days ago, and it made my skin crawl. I can't stop thinking about last night. I never thought we'd get caught. My heart stopped. Last night. Caught. What the hell was she talking about? I scrolled up, desperate to find more, but the rest of their conversation had been deleted. The whole thread between them had vanished, like it had never existed. I felt a pit form in my stomach. What had she deleted? What was she hiding? I slammed the phone down on the table, my hands shaking. I couldn't breathe. I had no answers, just more questions. The silence in the house was suffocating. I was left alone with my thoughts, each one darker than the last. I couldn't believe this was happening. It felt like my whole world had been ripped out from under me, and I was just left with pieces I couldn't put together. I had to find out more. But how? I couldn't keep sneaking around like this. I needed to confront her, but I wasn't sure I could handle the truth. I sat there, staring at the phone, knowing one thing for sure. I couldn't let this go. I needed to know who she was with. I needed to know everything. The next day, I barely said a word to her. I couldn't. Every time I looked at her, I saw that lie. It hung between us, thick and suffocating. She must have noticed the change because she kept asking me if I was okay. But how could I answer that? Could I really tell her that I knew about her secret? About Mr. Ryan? I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. I wasn't sure I ever would be. Instead, I spent the day planning. The time for asking questions was over. I needed evidence, something solid. I couldn't keep depending on half answers and guessing games. I needed to know everything. That night, I waited until she fell asleep. I listened to her even breathing from the other side of the room. For a while, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything I'd uncovered so far. But I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to dig deeper. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, and grabbed her phone again. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but I felt trapped. I had to know who Mr. Ryan was, and the only way to get that answer was to keep going. I went through her contacts first, scanning the list for anything that might hint at who he was. Mr. Ryan wasn't listed, but there were a few numbers with vague labels: work, family, friends. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Had she saved his number under something else? Maybe under a name I wouldn't recognize? I checked her recent calls, but there was nothing. No record of him. But then I remembered something. She had gone out the previous Friday night. She told me she was meeting a friend for dinner, a vague excuse that didn't sit right with me then. Was that when it happened? I went back to the messages again, scrolled through the ones I had already seen. Then I noticed something I hadn't caught before. A detail in one of the texts. I'll see you at the usual spot. After the kids are in bed. The usual spot? What the hell was that supposed to mean? My heart raced. This wasn't just about innocent chats anymore. They were meeting in secret. They were being careful. I set the phone down on the nightstand, my breath shallow. My hands were clammy. I had uncovered more, but it didn't feel like progress. It felt like a deepening hole, one I couldn't climb out of. But I had to keep going. I had to find out where she was going, who she was meeting, and why she was lying to me. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the bigger picture remained out of reach. And I wasn't stopping until I knew the whole truth. The following morning, I couldn't shake the feeling of being a stranger in my own house. I went through the motions, made coffee, and ate breakfast, but it felt like I was in a dream. Every little sound, every glance between us, felt weighted. I knew she could sense the tension, but she didn't ask. Maybe she didn't want to know what I had uncovered. Or maybe she just wasn't ready for me to figure it out. But I was close. I could feel it. That night, I followed her. She didn't suspect anything. I didn't even know what I was going to find, but I had to know where she was going. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I knew about her life outside of what she'd chosen to share. I wasn't even sure I knew her anymore. I waited until she got in the car, and then I followed at a distance. She didn't go far, just a few streets over, then parked in front of a small coffee shop. I parked a few blocks away, keeping my distance. I didn't want to be seen. I watched as she walked inside. It was just a coffee shop, nothing fancy, nothing suspicious. But the fact that she had gone there at night, after everything I had found, made my blood run cold. I stayed in the car, watching the door, waiting for her to come back out. Time passed slowly, and I could feel my heart beating faster with every minute. What was she doing in there? Who was she meeting? 45 minutes later, the door opened again, and she walked out with Mr. Ryan. My stomach dropped to the floor. I didn't even know how to react. They were talking quietly, laughing, as if this was something casual, as if it was normal. They didn't notice me. They didn't even look in my direction. I watched them get into his car. I wanted to follow them. I wanted to confront them right then, but I didn't. Part of me, most of me, wanted to scream and make them stop, but I couldn't. I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared for what would happen next. They drove off into the night, and I just sat there, unable to move, unable to think. It was happening. All the pieces were falling into place, and yet I still didn't know everything. I didn't know what they were doing together. I didn't know how long this had been going on. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. I wasn't done. And I wasn't backing down. I had to find out everything. The next few days dragged on like a bad dream. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her walking out of that coffee shop with him. The sound of their laughter echoed in my mind. It was like she had been leading a completely different life while I had been oblivious. I tried to act like everything was normal. I couldn't let her know that I knew what she had been doing. But it was harder than I thought. The moment I looked at her, I could hear their conversation replaying in my head, and I found myself growing colder, more distant. She noticed it, of course. She kept asking if I was okay, if something was bothering me. But I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. Not yet. I needed more answers. I needed to know why. I kept digging. The next day, I went back to the school. I couldn't just ignore the fact that he was a teacher there. He had to have some connection to the school, some record I could track down. Maybe it was obsessive, but I couldn't help it. I needed to know everything. The receptionist remembered me from the last visit. I could see the recognition in her eyes when I asked about Mr. Ryan again. She hesitated for a moment, like she was debating whether or not to say something more. I pressed her, just enough to make her talk. Mr. Ryan has been a teacher here for a while, she said, but there was something in her tone that told me she knew more than she was letting on. He's a good teacher. You must be very proud of your kid to have such a dedicated teacher. I nodded, trying to act casual, but inside, I was screaming. What else was she holding back? There had to be more. When I left the school, I went straight to a nearby cafe to sit and think. My mind was a mess of confusion and anger. I knew I needed to confront her, but I wasn't sure I could handle the full truth. How deep did this go? Was this just an affair, or was there more I didn't know about? That evening, I had a conversation with myself that I'd been avoiding for days. I had to confront her. I had to. But what if I was wrong? What if I was seeing things that weren't there? I could feel myself on the edge, but I wasn't ready to fall just yet. The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last. I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head. I had the evidence, the texts, the lies, the strange behavior. Yet part of me refused to believe it. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe I was wrong, that I was reading too much into things. She felt the distance too, but she didn't ask anything specific. She kept checking if I was okay, as if nothing had changed. I could barely stand it, the way she pretended nothing was wrong. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was still figuring it out, still trying to find the whole truth. The silence between us grew. It was like we were both waiting for something to happen. I wanted to confront her, but every time I tried to work up the courage, I stopped. How could I accuse her without knowing everything? I couldn't risk saying something without proof. That Friday night, she said she was meeting a friend. It felt like the last straw. I couldn't trust her anymore. I had to know where she was going, what she was doing. I decided to follow her. She went to the same coffee shop as before. I parked a few blocks away, out of sight, but close enough. I stayed in the car, watching her walk inside. But this time, I didn't wait. I couldn't sit there and pretend it didn't matter. I got out of the car and walked toward the window. From there, I could see them, her and Mr. Ryan. They were sitting at a corner booth, talking in low voices. I didn't hear much, but the tension between them was obvious. It wasn't like before. This wasn't a casual meeting. Then it happened. He leaned in and kissed her. I froze, my heart sinking. I should have gone inside. I should have confronted them both right then. But I didn't. I stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe. She quickly glanced around, checking if anyone had seen. It was a small moment, but it was enough. I couldn't unsee it. It was real. She was with him. The truth was right there, staring me in the face. I didn't know what to do. I felt paralyzed, like I was trapped in some horrible dream that I couldn't wake up from. There they were, right in front of me, my wife, my partner, kissing another man. It was so simple, so casual, like it had been happening for a long time. I could feel my chest tightening. My hands shook at my sides. It was like I was drowning, the air thick with disbelief and anger. I stood there outside that coffee shop, frozen. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Everything I had feared, everything I had suspected, was confirmed in that single moment. I didn't follow them when they left. I didn't confront her. I couldn't. I wasn't ready for what would happen next. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel or how to react. All I knew was that my world had shattered in the most basic way. The truth had been right there in front of me, but I wasn't prepared for the impact. I went back to my car and just sat there, staring at the steering wheel. I kept telling myself that I should go home, that I should talk to her, but I couldn't. I wasn't sure how to face her anymore. I wasn't even sure how to face myself. I had so many questions and no answers. Why hadn't she told me? Why hadn't she just been honest? Had it been going on for longer than I thought? I couldn't even begin to process everything. It felt like my entire life had been a lie. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I stayed in the car, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. But I didn't make a move. I didn't know what I would say or what would happen next. All I knew was that I had to get back to her. I had to talk to her. But I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed, and I didn't know if I was ready to face that. I went home that night, but it felt like I was walking through someone else's life. The house, the furniture, the pictures on the wall, they all seemed so distant. She was already in bed, asleep, her back turned to me. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her for what felt like forever. How could she sleep like that, so at ease? How could she pretend like nothing was wrong when I knew the truth? I kept my distance, sitting on the edge of the bed. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to scream at her, demand answers right then and there, but I didn't. The words felt stuck, like they were caught in my throat. I just sat there, thinking about what I had seen, what I had learned. I couldn't get the image of her kissing him out of my head. The next morning, I still hadn't figured out what to say. I got up early and went about my day like everything was normal. But I was barely there. Every time she looked at me, I felt like she was seeing right through me. I couldn't keep pretending, but I didn't know how to break it. She kept asking if I was okay, but I just nodded. I didn't know how to explain the wreckage in my chest, the confusion in my mind. I wanted to confront her, but I didn't have the words. What would I even say? She left for the day, and I was alone. I grabbed her phone again, hoping for more answers, but there was nothing new. The texts between her and Mr. Ryan had been deleted again. Everything was gone, wiped clean. I stared at the empty screen, frustration bubbling up inside me. How could she be so careful? How many times had she done this without getting caught? I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I had to know everything, all the lies, all the truth. But what if it destroyed everything? What if confronting her meant I lost her for good? I spent the day pacing, torn between wanting to end it all and wanting to understand why it had happened in the first place. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about trust, the years we'd spent together, the life we'd built. How could she throw it all away? The question kept echoing in my mind. What did I do wrong? I couldn't sit still. I walked the house, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. The weight of everything was crushing me. I was supposed to have a family, a life, a partner. But now, I was holding on to fragments of a life I wasn't sure I even knew anymore. I thought about confronting her. I thought about walking into the room, sitting her down, and saying, I know what you've been doing. But the more I thought about it, the more impossible it seemed. The truth felt like an avalanche waiting to come down. I wasn't sure I could survive it. I had to do something, anything, to get control. So, I decided to track her. I needed to understand how far this had gone, how often she was seeing him. Maybe if I understood it, I could confront her. Maybe if I knew all the details, it wouldn't hurt so much. That afternoon, I followed her again. She didn't even seem to notice. She went to the grocery store, then to a yoga class, and then she went to his house. My stomach twisted as I watched her park in front of his place. This time, I couldn't just stand there. I got out of the car and walked closer, not wanting to believe what I was seeing. She rang the doorbell. The door opened. They didn't kiss this time, but there was no mistaking the way they looked at each other. Something intimate, something familiar. She stepped inside without hesitation, the door closing behind her. I couldn't breathe. I should have turned and walked away. I should have been strong enough to let go of this, to walk away from the mess I had found. But I didn't. I stayed. I watched. And for the first time, I realized that what I was seeing was no longer just an affair. It was something more, something that had been building, maybe for months, maybe even years. I stayed there for what felt like hours, but I couldn't move. I didn't want to know what would happen next, but I couldn't make myself leave. The images in my mind, their laughter, the intimacy, the way she looked at him, were too much to ignore. I had to know. Eventually, she left his house. She looked over her shoulder as she got into the car, almost like she was checking if anyone had seen. I felt sick. I didn't want to know any more, but I couldn't stop myself. I didn't know what to do after that. I could have confronted her right then, but I didn't. Part of me was still holding onto some shred of hope that maybe I was wrong. Maybe she wasn't as deep into this as it seemed. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I couldn't unsee what I had just witnessed. The next few days were torture. I couldn't look at her without feeling the weight of everything. I wanted to talk to her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The idea of confronting her, of asking her to explain what I had already seen, terrified me. What would she say? How could she justify it? She could tell something was off. She asked again if I was okay, but I just nodded, forcing myself to act like everything was normal. I couldn't stand the fake pleasantries. I wanted to scream, to ask her why she had done this, why she thought I didn't deserve to know, but I couldn't find the words. Finally, I decided I had no choice but to confront her. I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that I didn't know what was happening. I needed the truth, all of it, no matter how much it hurt. That night, when the kids were asleep, I sat her down. She looked at me like she was expecting something, but I couldn't tell if she knew what was coming. I couldn't read her anymore. It was like she was playing a part in a play I wasn't a part of. I looked her in the eye and said, I know about Mr. Ryan. Her face paled. For a second, she didn't say anything. Then, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. What do you mean? I repeated myself, feeling the anger start to rise in my chest. I know what you've been doing. I know you've been seeing him. I saw you with him. She didn't deny it. She didn't try to explain. She just looked at me, like she was waiting for something. Maybe waiting for me to be the one to walk away. I'm sorry, she said finally. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to demand more. But instead, I just sat there, frozen. This wasn't the conversation I had been preparing for. This wasn't the closure I needed. It wasn't enough. The silence between us stretched for what felt like hours. Her words hung in the air, empty and hollow. She didn't apologize fully. She didn't even offer an explanation that made sense. It just did. That was all she could give me. I could feel my blood boiling. How could it have just happened? How could she betray me like this, and then reduce it to a simple accident? All these years, all this trust, shattered by a careless lie. I stared at her, trying to find the words that had been building in my chest. But they wouldn't come. What was there left to say? The truth was right there, in front of both of us. And yet it felt like everything had turned to dust. I don't know what to do with this, I finally said, my voice strained. Her eyes filled with tears, but it didn't make me feel any better. It didn't change the reality. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. I never meant for it to get this far. But it did, I replied, the words finally coming out, rough and jagged. You let it get this far, and I'm the one left picking up the pieces. I stood up, walking away from her, needing space to breathe. But I couldn't escape the hollow feeling in my chest. I was done with the questions, done with pretending everything was fine. As I left the room, I didn't look back. Maybe I should have asked more questions, demanded more answers. But I knew, deep down, that nothing she could say would change what had already happened. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything that had led to this moment. The lies, the broken trust, the years of doubt I had never let myself voice. And as I walked out of the room and into the night, I realized that some truths were too heavy to carry. Some truths couldn't be fixed, no matter how much you wanted them to. I didn't know what the future held, or if she would ever be a part of it. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in a lie any longer. I had to let it go. And maybe, for the first time in a long while, I would find a way to breathe again.